Little Archie, issue 65, It's Only Magic. Sabrina tells the audience that Zelda went to work as a library volunteer at her school. She wants to straighten out some books with her levitation, and Sabrina tells her to stop because someone's gonna see. Dilton shows up and says a big word instead of just saying magician, which is stupid of him to do because most people would be confused and waste his time with that. He wants a book on magic. It seems out of character for him. Zelda's sad that there isn't a book on magic in an entire library, but it is just a grade school library. So late that night, she called upon her powers and went to work writing a good book with a magical look. Somehow she thought it was smart to give a kid a book saying that if he follows some rules, he can wish for anything he wants. It really should have been Sabrina who made this mistake, because it'd make more sense that she'd be naive enough to think this wouldn't backfire. Dilton says he always wanted big muscles of steel, and Grundy says the door's stuck. He rips the door off, trying to take it off. Wouldn't the spell make him actually look muscular? That wouldn't look very good on a kid, but still, he would have wanted muscles partially because of their looks in the first place. He tells Grundy about the wish-granting book's magic words. Grundy wishes she was younger and ends up becoming a baby. Weatherby wonders what's going on, and Dilton tells him the truth, feeling pressured to do that right away to not get in trouble. Dilton could easily use the book to bring things back to normal. Why would Grundy become a baby when that's not what she wanted? Weatherby says he wishes pretty teachers would run after him. Naturally, that literally happens, and he doesn't like it. Jughead wishes he could be served all the food in the cafeteria. Never mind everybody else, and the fact that even he'd get full eventually. Betty wishes Archie would flip over her, rather than simply saying that she wants him in love with her. Lucky for her, he really does fall for her, as well as flipping. Sabrina tells Zelda that the whole school is going crazy over the book, and Hilda shows up, and says that the three of them were ordered to report to the chief. You mean Della? Sabrina says she means Merlin in this universe. For no reason, they won't use the whisk broom to get there faster, and after a long journey, they all fly into the kingdom of Merlin, the headmaster of witches. I like him better than Della, whose great appearance just made me wish I actually liked her more. Merlin expects Zelda to give up her powers. I guess that won't happen. Sabrina says conveniently that her history class has been studying Merlin, and she remembers a tournament of knights in itching powder, and the bat in the palace. He becomes nostalgic for the trouble he caused, and gives Zelda another chance, and she thanks him. So if he's okay with magic causing trouble after all, why did he try to punish Zelda for it? He says he'll pour a forgetful spell over all of them, including Sabrina for no reason, after bringing everything back to normal. He flatters the ants, calling them young, and hopes he won't see them until next Halloween, implying that the witches all pointlessly meet with him every Halloween. Sabrina says she didn't know all of those stories about Merlin. She knew he was quite a cut-up when young, so she just said a few things and his mind did the rest. I guess her aunts told her that. It makes more sense than her school inexplicably telling the kids about Merlin's prank days. The story ends with Sabrina's aunt saying she's going to be a great witch when she grows up. This story was about Zelda somehow making the mistake of giving Dilton a book that grants wishes, when all he wanted was a book on magic tricks, despite being a man of science. Somehow a fully grown woman didn't anticipate that the whole school would go crazy over that book, after centuries of living with mortals. At least it wasn't as predictable as Dilton being too ambitious with the book and using it too much himself. He didn't try to take over the world or anything. It turns out the head witch is Merlin in the Little Sabrina series, as it's apparently a separate parallel universe instead of actually being the canon past of the 70s comic, which would have given it more of a point. I thought that's what it was. It doesn't need to do this. Merlin lecturing Zelda explains why this kind of thing doesn't happen all the time, which explains why people don't already know about witches at the start of the comic. But since he can make everyone forget what happened and return things to normal, maybe it does explain that. Zelda could have cast that spell herself, so Merlin's depressing scene was only worth it to explain that he exists in this universe and punishes witches that give out wish-granting books. He's about to take away Zelda's powers for causing that kind of chaos, only to change his mind when made nostalgic about the evil pranks he used to pull. So does he want evil or not? At least Dell is consistent about what she wants. Merlin pretends to be a responsible head witch who makes more sense when he's actually no better. Little Archie, issue 66. That's all, folks. Sabrina tells her aunts that the school's just now starting a musical program and wants everyone to play an instrument. Maybe it makes sense that it's just now starting the music program because it's the 70s? I don't know. Zelda used to own a broom with a musical horn, and Hilda says they'd have to buy an instrument for no reason, even though she'd remember she can just zap one up. If witches were limited to what they can imagine the insides of for summoning, there's a lot they wouldn't be able to summon. Sabrina says she'd play the instrument in their attic. Inconveniently, the school doesn't even care which instrument the student plays, which doesn't make sense. What really happened is the school would waste time teaching the whole class to play recorders. At least in my experience. How can they teach her to play a mysterious instrument hidden under a tarp in their attic? The instrument belongs to her grandma, and she played it while mixing potions. It turns out it's a harp. And Hilda says that's weird for witches to play. I was expecting an instrument that barely anyone knows about at this point, so that's less creative. But at least this way the school could believably teach her how to play it. She wonders how to get something so big to school, and Zelda says they'll push it with a push broom. Or just zap wheels on it. She takes it to her teacher, and it was predictable right away that magic would happen because he played it, even though he's not its owner. A scream gets him out of the classroom, and Grundy says something flew down the hall. And it turns out to be a bat. Sabrina plays the note again and tests it out, and more bats show up. I guess she doesn't know how to point at the harp and get rid of its magic. Weatherby says the school can't afford an exterminator and tells Sabrina that she can't help because this is a job for a man. Weatherby puts up a stepladder for the music teacher to climb on and tells him to throw smoke bombs. Does Sabrina not know how to erase people's memories of stuff? Probably, or else she could just point to make the bats disappear and then make them forget them without arousing suspicion. The teacher falls off the ladder onto Weatherby, and the two of them go to a guy for help who tells them to use a high-pitched whistle to attract bats to them. Grundy's ready with a net and helmet, and the music teacher has a sack, but Weatherby doesn't have a helmet for some reason. And go figure, Weatherby's too scared of the resulting bats to let them catch them. And Weatherby swallowed the whistle when the music teacher slapped him on the back for no reason. All of the bats leave and head for a cave, where Sabrina says that the only ones who love the harp music are the bats. Weatherby thanks the school doctor for getting the whistle out of him effortlessly easily. The story ends with Jughead whistling and magically bringing all of the bats back instantly. This story was about Sabrina bringing a harp from the attic to school for music class because it's offering lessons on any instrument the student happens to bring. Sabrina assumes that a harp from a witch's attic won't cause magic to happen because she's not very experienced. And playing the harp summons bats to the school. I have to assume that Sabrina's grandma liked bats, and that's why. And I have to just assume that Sabrina can't erase people's memories of the bats to keep them from being suspicious of her making them vanish. So she uses the harp to lure them out of the school, but thanks to Jughead, it somehow has a here we go again ending. It's another plot I've never seen before. But can't Sabrina summon one of her aunts to make one of them erase people's memories for her? I have to assume that she didn't think of that because she's just a kid. So she was panicked and only thought to use the harp because it attracted bats before. Even if she somehow can't warp things to her, even though she can summon anything she wants, couldn't she make her aunts fly to her? Little Archie, issue 67, bigger and bigger. Zelda and Hilda think the lettuce is overpriced now. And because they're scaring the guy who works there, he tells them they should grow the stuff to save money on it, rather than telling them to buy it because he works here. Hilda agreeing to it makes me wonder what took her so long. Zelda says they could make the vegetables grow bigger than most farmers, as they openly talk about their magic and being witches in front of a mortal. I guess they used to think that women shouldn't be farmers, because they've been alive for centuries, so that's why it never occurred to them to become farmers until now. So they easily buy a bunch of vegetable seeds, and I wonder why they're gonna grow them at all instead of just summoning them fully grown. I guess they're not good at remembering what fresh vegetables taste like. Zelda puts the seeds in a literal bed because the directions said so, rather than simply telling her to put them in soil. Is that realistic of the instructions? Somehow Zelda was too ditzy to realize that it meant she has to make a hole, when even kids would know this stuff. She somehow doesn't get it, and Hilda makes the hole too big because she wants to grow big carrots. Sabrina comes home with Betty's parakeet while she's going to be away for a few days. I guess they assume Sabrina's more reliable than Veronica because she's not a pampered rich girl, even if she's not her best friend for some reason. The parakeet likes eating the seeds, and Hilda warns her to keep Salem from eating the bird. She should have known better. From Tweety Bird cartoons, at least. Hilda says they're finished and somehow almost forgets to use magic. She casts a spell saying that she wants the crops for tomorrow. Why not today? Well, she wants them ready for supper tomorrow night, so she naturally wants them to be picked as fresh as possible, not have them wait a day. Zelda naturally hopes the weeds won't grow as fast, because she's worried that the spell would affect something other than the crops. Hilda specified vegetables in her spell, so that'd be stupid. Sabrina says the cucumbers are growing through her window, and they see that the vegetables are way too big. That caused a panic from their neighbors. How were they surprised by how big they grew? Wouldn't Hilda have imagined the resulting fully grown crops to be smaller than this? All they did was think of them growing faster and they overdid it. Why is Sabrina freaking out instead of just using magic to shrink the cucumber? Somehow these witches decide to pull the giant carrot through the door instead of using magic to warp it to them, and using magic to shrink down the crops to whatever size they want and warp them to their kitchen table. They wouldn't be freaking out. A squash starts squashing the house. Then it turns out it was all just a dream. The parakeet got loose and ate all of the seeds from their garden, which was foreshadowed. And the story ends with the bird being giant, which is hilarious looking. How did the parakeet get loose though? This story was about the ants deciding to grow vegetables to save money. What took so long? Zelda decides to cast a growth spell on them when that's clearly not necessary, and the vegetables would clearly go bad before they'd get to finish them all, unless they also plan on casting an anti-rotting spell, in which case it was just as smart as I thought the idea was at first. Zelda dreams that she overdid on the growth spell, and it causes predictable chaos. Before we can even see how the neighbors react, it's revealed it was all a dream, and Betty's bird got loose of the cage and ate all of the seeds instead. So it's a story where ants were the protagonists and her presence only caused them brief trouble that'd be undone in a single spell. I don't know why they didn't just use magic to bury the seeds and water them while they're at it. I guess they just wanted to feel like farmers. Little Archie, issue 68, Music Maker. Merlin shows up at the house before Halloween to warn them that an evil witch is heading for Riverdale, and she's the nastiest witch of all and gives other witches a bad name. Apparently, witches want a good reputation in this universe, which is a first for the series. So little Sabrina was ahead of its time. Why don't any of these witches teleport Desdemona to the sun or move her powers? All of these people are omnipotent. So if the head witch disapproves of a witch abusing their magic and is aware of it, there is no excuse for the character still being able to cause trouble for the story. So this isn't going to be a believable plot. It'd actually be better to have Della be the head witch then, because I want to be questioning this in this story. She'd want her to act that way. And I hate the name Desdemona because it's hard to pronounce. I'll just call her the evil witch. So they find out the evil witch is back for revenge and are somehow intimidated. Sabrina has to get told that witches appear out of thin air instead of ringing doorbells, probably because Merlin rang the doorbell instead of doing that for no reason. Sabrina gets told to go to school with her friends who are apparently walking to school together instead of taking the bus for some reason. Jughead sees Merlin warp away and blames what he ate, and the evil witch plans against the schoolyard kids. She plays music to lure the kids to the river magically. Why is Jughead immune? Zelda goes to Grundy because Sabrina forgot to take her lunch, which is convenient because it lets her find out that all of the kids are missing. And for no reason, Jughead couldn't hear the music, so he was able to warn Zelda about what happened. Predictably, Zelda's worried about her trying to drown them because the woman ripped off Pied Piper, giving away her plan to anyone familiar with that story. So the ants decide to fly on a broom to go find the kids in front of them. Somehow Hilda can't stop her with her magic. She could freeze her in time, Zelda falls off the broom onto the witch's head, and somehow she's still alive and able to walk and play the music. Archie agrees to do it instead of using magic to turn them into frogs or worse, for no reason. And Zelda's not injured either. This story was about an evil witch coming to Riverdale for revenge against Merlin. And since the head witch already knows and hates her, it makes no sense that she still has her powers and access to anything magical. Merlin knowing she'd come here ahead of time just makes the fact that the story happens forced because he should just warp her and take her powers instead, like he threatened to do to Zelda without fear just fine. Instead, she's able to lure the kids of the schoolyard to the river, lazily ripping off Pied Piper. There wasn't much that was creative and thus memorable about the story. There's an evil witch for a villain in a series about witches not being so bad. The head witch warning Sabrina about an evil witch reminded me of Professor Pither's story from the end of the 70s comic later. There's no explanation for why Jughead couldn't hear the music and was there to tell Hilda to save the day. At least it was creative that Zelda stopped the witch by falling on her, when magic failed.